Okay.
It's thinking about it. It says it's setting it up. Okay. So hopefully, I'll just check, but hopefully we are now live on Facebook. My video keeps freezing, which is not a brilliant start. Let me just check that we are streaming. Yes.
Great.
Looks like we're streaming, but we can just see me at the moment, and I want us in that two window thing. So I wonder how we do that. Hang on a minute. If anyone knows, share screen. No. Right. We need you there. Welcome everyone. If you are watching, welcome. We're just sorting out the technology. I'm exceptionally pleased to be joined by Adrian Dray, who we will introduce in more detail in a minute. We're going to be talking about subject access requests and data breaches, both of which are highly relevant going forwards, even if you think that you have all of your GDPR ducks in a row. Then you're still going to need practical guidance as to what to do if you actually get a subject access request or a data breach. And we're going to be bringing out in this interview how important it is to know what you're doing. Well, how important it is to know what you're doing and have backup support should you need it. So stay tuned while we just try and sort out how to get our video screen so that you can see Adrian at the same time as me. If anyone's watching and you've used Zoom, and then you've used Zoom streaming it live onto Facebook, and you know how to get that setting where we're both shown at the same time in the video, then pop me a message on the Facebook comments, because otherwise I'm struggling a bit here. I've done it before.
Is it something to do with grid view, Suzanne? Is there something on your screen?
Where's that?
I don't know. I just saw that on mine.
Group view?
Yeah. I don't know if that changes anything on your end.
Hang on, look, has that worked? There's a bit of a time delay, so we'll see, but yeah. Hang on. What's it showing on yours? Is it showing both of us at the same time?
Yeah, it's showing on my screen, but whether that's been replicated on the group, I can't say.
I'm in speaker view, but I think looking at Facebook, it still seems to, no, because there's a delay. Yes. Right, we're both there now. This is awesome.
Okay.
We're both there. Excellent.
Good. Right. Cool.
Technology has been sorted. So good. Well, welcome again, everybody who has joined us. Thanks so much for showing up live. I'm delighted to have Adrian Dray here with us. Now, Adrian and I probably became acquainted just pretty much after I set up my GDPR Facebook group. And Adrian has been super helpful both in my group and also really behind the scenes. He's always messaging me interesting articles and saying, have you read this? Or what's your take on this? And we have a little chat about it. And he's really embraced the whole GDPR scene and is a real authority on the area. So I'm thrilled to have him here, not only because he is that expert, but also because he and the company that he works for are offering some really practical help in the reality of GDPR. So, we've kind of been dealing with almost the theory of GDPR and putting things into place in order to be compliant. And what Adrian and his team do is help you with the reality. What happens when you get a subject access request? What happens when there is a data breach? What happens when X happens, Y happens, etc. And the reason I'm so thrilled to have Adrian there to help you all is that we come very much from the same place, which is, like me, Adrian is very much not a scaremonger. He's there to say it how it is. There's no hype from him about, you need to spend thousands with us or else. They provide a super affordable service, which again is a value that's very close to my heart. And he's passionate about it. So that's why I've just been really pleased to find a kindred spirit and be able to provide this kind of link up between our services. So we're going to deliver a ton of value on this interview, and then we're going to tell you what you can do if you actually need more bespoke support. And also it's a really good number to have in your little black book, as it were, because if you've not been hit by a subject access request or a data breach now, then if you do in 6 months, 12 months, 5 years, it's going to be really good to know when you're in that panic of thinking, oh my goodness, do I have to report it to the ICO? Do I have to go out to all the data subjects and tell them what's happened, etc.? It's going to be really useful to have that number in your little black book of trusted suppliers that you can phone up straight away and stop that panic and those sleepless nights. So, so Adrian, do you want to just say a little bit about your background, how you came into all this, why you love GDPR?
Yeah, I mean, since I started my working career, I've always worked in a sector where data protection has been really important. So I worked with the police in education, healthcare, financial services. So whether or not I've been, actually on doing data protection has not always been the case, but I've been surrounded in that arena where it is a very important thing. And when GDPR came out, I could really see how, what sort of work needs to be behind this. But like with any piece of compliance, you're always going to get misinformation, scaremongering, and snake oil sellers. And I sort of I was a business consultant at the time, trained myself up with GDPR, put some practical experience there as well, helping particularly in the healthcare. So with dentists, something up the area, I've been running a group, about nearly 4,000 members, assisting with them. And that's really helped me. My wife, not so happy. She wishes I took up FIFA like her other friends' husbands. Calls herself a GDPR widow, but I think that it's a really important piece of legislation. I understand that it's human rights, effectively, but also I do feel sorry for organisations that have been given just the worst information. It's not destroyed, but it's unnecessarily disrupted their business pattern, and that's going to affect salaries. It's going to affect the prices of things, all because someone shouted the loudest, but the wrong information. And the company that I belong to, a Metros Group, really sort of compelled by the fact that they wanted to help businesses, but also respect the rights and freedoms of those data subjects. So a balanced approach to that without the scaremongering.
Absolutely. Good. Well, let's get stuck into some content here. So we're going to talk about subject access requests first, and then move on to data breaches. We're going to be showing some, obviously we can't go into the exact details of what Adrian's been helping clients with, but we'll give you certainly a flavour of the types of work that he's been doing with people and how he's been helping people. And I think that, certainly with both subject access requests and, well, let's do a subject access request first. It is a fact, we are going to see much more subject access requests coming across our desks. We've already seen it. People are much more savvy now about their data protection rights, much more so than they ever were under the old legislation. And people are rightly, in my view, certainly when you get an email from someone and you've never heard of them and you're like, well, have you got my data? What data are you holding on me? So I think we are already seeing a lot more subject access requests. And I think that is only going to be an increasing trend. And it's for us as consumers, it's good to know we've got that right, or be more conscious of that right now. But as businesses, we need to know how to respond to that properly. And I think a lot of people are confused about what a subject access request necessitates. Does it mean you have to provide the kitchen sink in terms of the information that you hold on them? Well, no, it doesn't. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that in a bit. It's actually very dangerous to provide the kitchen sink. You have to restrict some of the information, or you could find yourself in a bad position. I think there's three key areas to subject access requests. Firstly, it is not going to come through the door with a big heading saying subject access request.
Yeah.
Okay. So training here is key. And Adrian's going to give some examples as to, and in the data breach side as well, about how training has really fallen down. Even when the employer thought the staff were trained properly, still huge problems. Okay, so staff training, really key. The person that opens the post, that's a key role in recognizing data protection rights. And like I say, they're not going to come with a big heading of subject access requests. They're going to come in all kinds of myriads of ways. And that person will need to distinguish what needs to be escalated to the person in your organization who's in charge of data protection. So training is one key area. Secondly is having a sufficient handle on the data that you have, having a sufficient handle on the data that you have so that you can respond to that subject access request within the time periods, the prescribed time periods. Because a lot of people I know, particularly small businesses, wouldn't know where to start in trying to extract that data from their systems. Maybe they've got legacy systems that haven't been tidied up properly. You know, there isn't an easy button you can press that is going to give you all of the information that you, or personal data, which is what we're talking about here. There's not an easy button you can press that's going to download all of the information that that person needs. So it's going to be a big job. And the more systemized you can be, the more of a handle you can have on your data flows at the outset, then the easier it's going to be for you to reply within the time limits to subject access requests. And then the third point I've already alluded to, which is, you know, make sure you're giving them what you have and what you need to legally hand over, but that won't be everything. Okay, and that's a really key point. Okay, so, and we'll come into this probably 4 areas that you need to be thinking of in terms of what you don't hand over as part of a subject access request. So they're my kind of 3 things that are important to me when I think about subject access requests. But let's move this over to Adrian's experience. So he's going to share with you some recent examples of work that he's been doing with clients, and we'll talk about the implications of that and what that means and what are the learning points for your business. Okay, so Adrian, subject access requests. What, firstly, in your experience, are you seeing more of these? Are they you know, and we talked about this earlier, there was the letter that did the rounds on LinkedIn, which was, you know, sort of 2 pages of A4 in very almost quite legalistic language, which put the fear of God into any company that opened that, you know, and had to take that seriously. So what's your experience of, what's your reading of the current environment for subject access requests?
Yeah, I've just put down a list really of a few bullet points on why there's been this increase. I mean, we saw it on May 25th. One of our clients, who's a solicitor firm, they received a hand-delivered letter. It was this nightmare letter that you referred to just a moment ago, and it put the fear of God in them. And we were able to review that. And I know of my peers have also, you know, their clients have received such a letter as well. Now, the reason, I think what we've got to see behind that is why is that particular letter, or why subject access requests in general there's been a rise in that? I think there's a few reasons. One, the charge has been removed. It's amazing how much £10 can stop someone from asking for their information. That was quite a big wall for a lot of organizations. Also, I think, you know, the ICO awareness program, it wasn't as large as I thought it was going to be, but it's definitely increased, you know, that awareness going through. The fact that we had all the pandemonium around May 25th in general, you know, it came up on Newsnight. People probably think, oh, what is this GDPR? They read up about it, they're going to find out. But I think one of the most key areas, which is a good and bad thing, is that most businesses have been training staff for the very first time regarding data protection. And those members of staff are data subjects. So if you've got organizations all across the UK, for instance, they are now getting a foundation lesson in what GDPR is about. And the reasons why they would want to put that data subject access request, we're going to have genuine reasons, and then we're going to have, you know, the not so genuine reasons. It all goes hand in hand. So we're going to see those increase. But the thing which we'll come on to in a minute is the fact that the only data breach that you may have is from mishandling a data subject access request. And that's quite a scary thought. And that's why it's really important. You know, the handling of data subject access requests is very important, but also is the ongoing point of mitigating data breaches. And one thing that we're seeing, we discussed earlier, is this rise of data breach compensation firms. using Article 82 of the GDPR, not just because of data breaches, because Article 82 talks about an infringement of the regulation. Data breach is just one way, but how the rights and freedoms of an individual is being protected and is being handled by an organization, you know, that could be classed as an infringement, especially as it now covers material and non-material damages. Non-material damages being anxiety, distress, hurt feelings. So we live in a very different world, and it's very hard for me to say that without sounding like I'm a scaremonger, as I said. But seriousness is not scaremongering. Seriousness is genuine, it's truth, and something that needs to be adopted from the board right down to the front line.
Absolutely, and you said there about, you know, data breaches occurring when you're responding to a subject access request. I think that's a really key point, because it's so easy to do, and we're going to share later an example of how a company very easily, as when it was complying with a subject access request, implemented a huge data breach.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's the two things are almost linked in that way. Okay, so let's talk about the recent work that you've been doing on subject access requests. And so, if I know a question that a lot of people have had in the group is, and it's actually come from when people have been, as a consumer point of view, have been asking for their own subject access request. And the company on the other side has said, before we can do anything, please send us your passport. And these are companies that you've never heard of, and you're thinking, no way am I sending you my passport or my driving license or any more data. I just want to know how on earth you've got hold of my data. So what's your take on that? I mean, we can ask for reasonable evidence, but what is playing out as reasonable evidence? Should we, if we receive, as business owners, if we receive a subject access request from somebody who maybe, they didn't know how we got hold of their email address, and they've sent that email to us saying, how have you got my email address? Then and also send me, have you got my email address, and please send me all of the data that you hold on me. Then what is the reasonable efforts or the reasonable information that we need to make sure that someone's not hacking that email account to find out that data? What's your thoughts on that?
On that case, I mean, if it's just, say for instance, someone's been left on a subscriber's mailing list, and that's potentially the only information that they have, they would have to, in that particular case, it's only just an email address, then maybe that email address is sufficient for them. They've got to, the data controller has to think about what information could I potentially be giving to this person if it's not the right person. This is an identity theft situation, and then need to come up with proportionate ID checks for that.
So if they're just a prospect on my database, and I literally hold their name, their email address, and I can say to them, look, I can see you signed up for my freebie on such a day and blah, 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 then obviously I would feel quite comfortable giving that person that data without any kind of like that. If, however, I was holding sensitive data on a person or financial details, then I would want to go to that next level of receiving a passport. And okay, well,
exactly.
And there's probably grey areas in the middle, and you have to take a view on that. Then the question is that then if we have to, as companies, request that passport and that driving license, and that is in itself sensitive data, how do we then implement our systems to provide for that? If you're a business that doesn't, as a matter of course, handle sensitive data, and suddenly we've got somebody's passport, which is showing ethnicity and etc., then how do we, suddenly do we then have to, rush out a new privacy policy that says, here's how we handle your sensitive data, etc. What are the practicalities of actually processing and storing that data?
Exactly. So I think that you're absolutely right. An organization that may not handle special category information or specificatory data, like for instance ethnicity for that particular process. That's not reflective on their record of processing of activities. So they have to be careful with that, because now the goalposts have changed. So the thing is, what you want to be able to do is, as an organization, you want to be able to verify that I'm covering my back, so I'm not opening up and giving information to someone who's not saying who they are. So the passport is one way of doing that. Some feel that passport's not the right way, but I think we've got to be realistic with things until we've got some other universal ID checker. The other thing is that some are just, instead of capturing that information, using it for that specific purpose, destroying it, but then maybe keeping, the last 4 digits of that passport information for their own log to show that they
have actually checked. Yeah, that's a good.
And I think that's reasonable. So if the if for instance the ICS came over to you, or a complaint was raised and said, what measures did you put to check that ID? So look, we don't have the actual document because we have no reason for that, but we have checked that, and this is what we've retained, and I think that is reasonable. Yeah, for that particular type of data subject.
You had we were talking earlier, and you had a case recently that did involve sensitive data, and it involved sensitive data of a child. So what steps would you have to, because presumably it was the parent that was making the subject access request on behalf of the child. So what lengths did your client have to go to there to ensure that it was dealing with the right person, and then how did they actually respond to that subject access request?
Yeah, exactly. So because there was special category information for a child, and this is for a healthcare provider, there was the ID checks for the person requesting information, and also to see what their relationship is with that end data subject being the child. So on the UK law, we've got something called parental responsibility, so it's automatically afforded to the mother, and in this particular case, because of the type of information that could be available, a copy of the birth certificate was requested for that. Now, if that was the father, or if that was maybe a partner or someone like that, there are some further legal documents to prove that they have a parental responsibility there as well. The age of the child is 6 years old, so something that the organisation had to look at reasonably is whether in this particular circumstance, the parent or this person could talk on their behalf. And I think at 6 years old, that's fairly reasonable. But when you're looking at, maybe someone who's 12, 13, then the organisation could think, actually, we're just going to pass this straight to the end data subject. But this is the important thing that I know you say all the time, I say all the time: record it. You never know. It might just seem like another admin task, but it might be the thing that is your bulletproof vest if it ever goes pear-shaped.
Absolutely. So just a question for the guys listening in. How confident do you feel if you hit with a subject access request tomorrow? How confident would you feel in dealing with it? So I'm not just talking about the knowing what information to ask for to verify the identity of the person asking for the data, but how confident would you feel in understanding your time limits, knowing when you can charge, knowing when you can say no, this is, we're not going to reply to this at all, knowing what data you'd actually need to disclose? How confident are you in knowing what to do if you were hit with one tomorrow? Just post in the comments to let me know where you are on this. Because I imagine that most people, you probably, and also let me know if you've had one before as well. I imagine that nobody listening has, because, actually, I'm not actually, I don't think I've worked with thousands of small business owners over the last 10 years, and I'm actually not aware of any of them. And I think that's absolutely going to change for all the reasons that Adrian talked about before. And I think that's why it's really key for us all to know. Like I say, the training is key, the knowing how to respond to it. Because I know, Adrian, you were saying that, certainly some of your clients, when they've had it, and well, the subject access request and the data breach, there's that sense of panic, isn't there? That panic, oh my goodness, you know, I know that I've got to do something about this. I know it could potentially be quite serious, but I don't know what to do. And if you don't know what to do and you don't know who to ask, that's really actually quite a scary place to be as a small business owner.
Yeah, and you know, what we've come across is people called us up, ones that we're working with, and maybe in the early stage of the compliance framework we send them through, and they said, we've had a data breach. And we're, well, okay, we're taking it seriously now. And it actually transpires they've had a data subject access request. And, you know, for us working, you know, we might have a little bit of a chuckle, and actually with the person later on, they think, oh, that's a bit of a silly thing to say. But that's not uncommon to be said. So in some cases, there's unnecessary panic. It's not uncommon for us to hear that people said that I've put off calling you, but I haven't slept for the last 3 nights because I've had this, I don't know what to do about it. And, you know, we try and sort of calm them down and help them through that. But I think the thing is, what I'm finding is a lot of people said, GDPR, A, doesn't matter to me, or I've done everything I need to, but this is the acid test of that, because it completely switches as soon as there's these, I call them critical moments of GDPR, unforeseen critical moments. And that's when you measure yourself as an organization, but also the data subject is going to measure you as an organization, how you deal with that. I was looking just before we connected on the meeting, the ICO enforcement with Wainwright's estate agents. That's publicly available. That's their reputation. I mean, they got what do they get? A £500 fine, something like that. You know, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot. That was obviously on the old regulation, but that's their name put out there. So I think, you know, reputation also is there. So panic sometimes is over the top, but sometimes it's probably a little bit worth it, you know, to get the ball rolling.
Well, we just had some comments in on that. So Ruta says not confident, as it would be the first for her. Derek says I'd be pretty comfortable, but only because I've had quite a lot of experience with them at small business and large corporate level. But that doesn't change the fact it would be a massive headache, especially with the tech stack of most businesses today, even small businesses. If you do any type of online marketing, email, social, paid ads, you're likely to have at least half a dozen tools that harvest personal data, etc. So yes, it is, you know, whether you're confident about it or not, it's still, like Derek says quite rightly, a massive headache. And especially if you don't have a good grip on all your, you know, you've got lots of different unconnected systems and legacy systems, and you're trying to work out, yeah, bit of a nightmare. Okay, good. All right, so getting into the nitty gritty then of subject access requests. So we know that we can no longer charge a fee, except where, now what's the word? Do you have the exact wording to hand, Adrian?
Or is it manifestly?
Manifestly unfounded or excessive?
That's the one, yeah. I knew the first word.
Yeah, check the exact word. So basically, if you have a vexatious subject access request, and you could argue that the one doing the rounds on LinkedIn is a vexatious request, then you can go back to them and say, well, you've got 2 options really. I think one is you can say we're going to charge, and I think the regulation says that you can charge a reasonable admin fee. What reasonable is anybody's guess. You know, there is a possibility that you would need to justify it. So work on some logical basis for the charging of that. And I think there is, now where is the section that says you can even refuse? Where's that bit? It's amazing, a 2-week holiday, Adrian, and I had all these articles like at the back of my hand, but right.
Yeah, let me just get it up. Exact wording. Yeah, you can. You can refuse on that basis. Being manifestly.
It's the recitals actually. Anyway, the point is that if it is a valid, if you feel there is merit in it, it's a bona fide subject access request, then you have to act quickly. You can't charge them. you've got 30 days in which to reply from the date of you receiving the subject access request, and you know that you can, if you need to go back to them to verify their identity, then that 30 days starts from the date on which you receive that information back to you. Okay. But do be careful about your time limits. Understand when you can charge and when you can't. And as we say, you know, there isn't like a black and white here. But if it is, if you think it's clearly vexatious, then you can. Or it is excessive, you know, someone's asking for, you know, every bit of detail going back 20 years and, you know, etc., then you can have that go back to them. You can't just obviously ignore it. You have to go back to them and explain why it's either you feel it's excessive or unfounded. But otherwise, if you've got a straightforward subject access request, then it's 30 days and you can't charge. Okay. I just want to find that bit about, because you can refuse. I'm pretty sure you can refuse, but I want to give the exact wording.
Yeah, no, I'll have a quick look at it as well. I think just to fill in what you just said as well, something that we've seen some organise it, not necessarily our clients, but ones that I've heard of, who have put processes in place to stall the data subject. So got to be very careful with that as well, with complex and over-the-top ID checks. You know, you've got to be able to look at it as if this is going to ever go to court. So if you can show that you're cooperating, that you're reasonable, and you can say something with your honour after it, then that's, you know, put your processes to that. Sorry, yeah, you found it. Go ahead.
I found it. Yeah, recital 62. So it's not necessary to provide information where the data subject already processes the information, where the disclosure of the personal data is expressly laid down by law, or where the provision of information proves to be impossible or would involve a disproportionate effort. The latter, i.e. involve a disproportionate effort, could in particular be in the case where processing is carried out for archiving purposes in the public interest, scientific or historical research purposes or statistical purposes, blah, blah. So I think that is a, you know, impossible or to involve a disproportionate effort. I think that's going to be a rare get out, you know, so I wouldn't be arguing that as a matter of course. That would be a very rare circumstance in which I would argue that. And let's just see about the, so in terms of the time period, you can extend the time period. And that is where, just scanning the recital. No, it's not in the recital, must be back in the article.
Yeah, additional 2 months.
But what's the word? Is the wording to do with the what's the exact wording as to when you can extend it?
Let me just go to it. Right to access. Why can't you find it when you're looking for it?
I know.
Yeah.
It's the case. Well, I can't find it in there. I'm going to.
No, it isn't. Yeah, maybe we can put that in it.
So we can't find the exact wording, but basically, if the data subject is asking you for a ton of information and it's not reasonable for you to provide that within the 30 days, then you can have an extension of up to 2 months. But you have to write to the data subject within the original period of 30 days to explain why you can't respond within that time period. And again, as Adrian says, you always need to be thinking about this and writing back to them as though these are pieces of documents that could, in theory, end up either in a court or in front of the ICO. Because remember, you know, civil claims can be made now. So these are very much the exception rather than the norm. You can't think, oh, I'm going on holiday for a couple of months, I'll just write to them and extend it for 2 months. It has to be very unusual circumstances for you to be able to rely on that exemption for the extension of the time period. Okay, so so we get the subject access request in. It's quite straightforward. We respond within the period of time. What do we need to think about in terms of what we disclose, how we disclose it, what format we need to disclose it in, etc.?
So one of the what we disclose, I think, is very, very important, especially if this nightmare letter is doing the rounds, because actually interwoven in that letter is things that the data subject can ask, but also it asks the things which they don't have, they shouldn't be privy to. They shouldn't be privy to the IT security infrastructure of an organization or their breach background, things like that, because that's private information. You've also got intellectual property that's there. We've got trade secrets. So when you're going through what you're going to release, you need to be careful, and you can redact, areas which that they don't need to know about. If they come back to you and ask, why is line 62 being taken out, you can say because you're not allowed to have that. It's not concerning you. It's a trade secret. It's intellectual property. That sort of thing. And the GDPR allows that protection for businesses. Also, something to be aware of if in the UK is Schedule 2, Part 3, and Paragraph 16 of the Data Protection Act 2018, which is protecting the rights of others. So if as part of the data subject access request, it's referring to information of other people, there are certain points that you need to look at. In most cases, you would need to have the consent of that other, a reference to another person where they can be identified before you can include that as part of the subject access request. So that's important as well. And that leads back to what I was saying earlier, that it could be the only data breach that you have is from mishandling a data subject access request. I can't remember the other points you said, Suzanne. Sorry.
So yeah, I mean, you need to be careful about. I think the main point is the one that you raised, which is the disclosing information about other people. So that is key, and also, if it's managed, particularly when you're dealing with data subject access requests from employees. Maybe it's because that it's part of a grievance procedure or a disciplinary or a redundancy exercise or things like that. Then certainly, management forecasting and any sensitive information in that respect, you wouldn't have to disclose. Legal privilege, again, you wouldn't need to disclose that. I did put a note in the group about what you do and what you don't have to disclose. And actually what we've done is, and in fact, it's been done for a few weeks now, and I've just not had time to post it in the group and put it in the pack, but we've got a subject access flow chart, which I think will help people. And in there, it guides you through the process and tells you what you don't need to actually disclose. So do grab a copy of that. And just going back to the extending the time for the response, the ICO view is that it's unlikely to be reasonable to extend the time limit if, actually, I think they've said that wrong. It's likely, it must be likely. If it's manifestly unfounded or excessive, if an exemption applies, or if you're requesting the proof of identity before considering the request, then you can extend the time for a further 2 months. If it's complex, if it's complex or you've received a number of requests from an individual, then you can extend it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. So now time is cracking on. So I want to switch on to data breaches. But in summary, for your subject access requests, I think the key things to take away from this are training. We haven't really talked about the training for staff, but identify who in your organisation are going to receive those first points of contact about it, and train the post, whoever opens the post, whoever is on your support email address, whoever opens those emails. Train them in what to look out for. It's not going to be headed data subject access request. It will be, please tell me what information you've got on me. Probably variations on that theme. But make sure that they are aware of that they know the time limits and that they know who to escalate it to. Secondly, make sure you've got all your time limits. Make sure you know what evidence you can ask for proof of identity if you need it. and then make sure that you're using the documents in my pack to respond to those data subject access requests. And make sure, as Adrian said, you keep everything on file. So if there's ever an investigation. And just to say, in terms of the seriousness of this, we didn't talk about it earlier, but there is, I think, an enforcement action that's just recently been published. It's going to be in my next newsletter. And a small company didn't respond to one subject access request, and the ICO have investigated and published an enforcement action. And as Adrian says, although there's no fine for that yet, if they still fail to comply, then chances are they'll get a fine. But their name is now on that list of enforcement actions in the ICO for people like me and Adrian to use as case studies, which I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't want that. You know, that's going in my newsletter next week, and I wouldn't want that reputational brand damage if I was a small business owner. So we need to take it really seriously.
And if I was a competitor of them and we were going for the same contracts, that's what I'd be showing. You know, if I could say, oh, you know, we've actually got a data protection officer, we don't need one, but we've got one. The other guy's looking at, you know, have a look on the ICO website. Do you want to be attached to them? I mean, obviously saying it probably a bit more diplomatic way, but the tune is the same, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it, I think, on subject access requests. And and look out for my flowchart, which I will be posting. That will help. So, in terms, just before we move on to data breaches, Adrian, in terms of how you help people through this process. So I've received this subject access request. I've got your number. I pick up the phone and say, Adrian, I've got this data subject request. I don't know what to do. How can you help me? What sort of process do we speak on the phone and you ask me lots of questions, and what's your sort of practical involvement beyond that?
So we have a helpline service that it's actually come about from talking to lots of businesses looking for an affordable sort of like a bat phone, you know, call up and get that help. So we'd already taken assessment, and that speeds up the process because we get an idea of exactly what kind of organization we're talking with. You know, the sort of IT, very basic stuff, not really straight go into it because we have other services for that. But that allows us to understand what type of organization they have. We've got certain members in our team that specialize in education, healthcare, other sides. So they know the sort of nuances and different sides of it as well. And from there, we'll be able to obviously try and calm them down if they're maybe overreacting to it, like this, you know, is it a data breach with data subject access request, and go through and to basically, sounds a bit patronizing, but to train that person on the spot to say, look, okay, the first thing to do is all about attitude. You need to show that you're reasonable and you're cooperating. And the first thing you need to do is to make sure that we get the correct ID checks and then go through, probably similar to what you've got on your flowchart, but you've got a friendly neighbor that's got their arm around you and guiding you through it, because we don't want our clients to feel like they're on their own when it comes.
And do you go in and actually help people find the relevant data in their systems? Have you got techie people that can do that, or how do you support people through that process?
We don't have the software to do that. There is some software packages which are coming out to help with that. It might be overkill for certain organizations. However, when we do this assessment, we've got an idea of what's being held, and we're one of the few compliance groups that actually have the cyber and the IT background as well. So if it's to do with that side of things, then we have consultants that have much better knowledge than I do on those particular things to give them the heads up and give them the guidance. It might be a case, you know, we see that you've got IT support from so-and-so, we recommend you contact them. They're going to be able to assist you with that bit. On that particular side. Brilliant.
All right, well, let's move on to data breaches because it is obviously an area of concern for many of us. And have to say, you know, from the security interviews that I did in the run up to GDPR coming into force in the group with security experts, I was amazed at how easy it would be for people to really hack into my systems and how easy it'd be to hack into my systems, but how easy it would be for staff members to lose not sensitive data, because I guess potentially financial information, etc. And I was quite, I wasn't really awake to that kind of side of things. Unfortunately, touch wood, I've never experienced a data breach and won't do going forwards. But I was really surprised actually at how I could be at risk, and I didn't. I didn't realize. I thought small business, but it really woke me up to how, and certainly I've been in touch with my IT people, and we've looked at the security side of things. So data breaches, can and do happen. Remember, it's not just about hacking. It's about, CCing people into emails and or incorrectly sending emails to people that they shouldn't have received. It's about employees losing data, leaving them in briefcases in pubs or on trains or whatever. It's vast, and I think there's a statistic that I've heard. I don't know whether it's true or not, but it must be if it's been spouted in lots of data protection conferences. 80% of data breaches are caused by the negligence of employees.
Yeah. So
again, an area where staff training is really key. And also what they find is that employees, as you might expect, aren't the first to volunteer that they've done that because they think they're going to get the sack. And then, of course, that brings even greater problems for you because you've got the time limits to report to the ICO, to report to the data subjects if you need to do so. So this is a super key area for staff training. Yeah. So, Adrian, you share your perspective on data breaches and how you've helped your clients through those.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got the scenario which I'd like to give in a minute, which I share with you. We've had to change some of the details because it's an ongoing investigation, but it's based on human error. And when on May 25th, one of my favorite GDPR jokes kind of thing was a picture of a boxer's ring, and you got the commentator in the middle, and he's saying, in the blue ring we've got firewall, malware protection, all this kind of stuff, and in the red corner we've got Dave and human error. And I thought, actually, you know what, that's really true, and we saw that quite quickly. So if I may, Suzanne, could I give that sort of scenario that this real life data breach that we got? Yeah. Okay, so in this particular situation, I'm using pseudonyms here, but in this situation, our client's called ABC Corp. Okay, now they received an email from a member of staff asking for a copy of their HR record. Okay, they wanted to check that. And they outsource all their HR stuff to a different organization. So they emailed the other organization, their HR guys, and said, look, can we get an HR record for John Jones? So this is effectively a data subject access request. Now, the HR firm said, yeah, sent it over fairly quickly, and they said, see attached. Without checking that email, our client then went and forwarded that to John Jones. John Jones came back and said, if you check that attachment, and on further inspection, that attachment was a zip file of dozens of HR records, not for that organization, but for a different organization. Now, our client, that was a human error thing. I've sent text messages to the wrong people. That's awkward. This is serious, a bit more serious, but it's an organization. So they called us up. Obviously very concerned. They did the right thing. They were going through the compliance journey with us, and we were able to help them with this. It was the action points are, this was a serious data breach. Okay, the rights and freedoms of those individuals have been breached. But also interesting with this one is who really is to blame and who needs to report this, and what do we need to do straight away. So the first thing was to really make sure that information, the then source, John Jones's mailbox, was destroyed, and we had confirmation of that, so it's not going to go any further. The next bit was to obviously inform the HR services to say, look, you've done this, but you need to go and speak to the person who's opened this can of worms up immediately. And then our client actually employed us to speak to the ICO on their behalf. I tell you what, that hold music was like my you know the bit they say, we're sorry about your wait, and I was like, yeah, me too. Yeah, it's eventually we got into and explained to them. They said it's a serious data breach, and we said that this is the firefighting we've done first. This is what we've done. We put a report together for the organization. We're helping them through their GDPR compliance journey. The HR are probably going to be in touch. They hadn't been in touch already, the ICO said. And also we said, look, some long-term training is going to go, long-term recommendations, full training for everyone else, and particularly for this this individual who was behind it, you know, without them making them feel really bad.
You mean the one at your client's organisation who just forwarded it on without checking?
Yeah, absolutely.
But the HR company, because it is already the data breach was already committed in sending those details to your client because it was for a different organisation.
Yeah, so we got 2 data breaches, but you know, it's kind of guilty by association, and especially as they've then replicated that action by doing it again. So I think the main thing with this thing is this could happen to any organisation, and if people say GDPR doesn't apply to me, I'm not Facebook, I'm not this, yeah, that's fine. You may not be getting attacked by the top 10 hackers in the world, but it's so easy to forward that. I've done it myself, you know, thankfully it's not been to this scale, but it's so easy to do. And this constitutes as a data breach. And again, that was on the back of a simple data subject access request. I mean, this is a very weird situation, but that could easily happen.
So the steps that the ICO were happy with were that you got in touch with the end recipient, made sure that he deleted that information, and staff training for the person who'd forwarded it on, told them that you'd been helping them with GDPR compliance and showed that they were taking it seriously. What else? Was there anything else that the ICO took into account there?
The fact it all had been documented. So we put our report together. One of the main things I forgot to add was that it was in their data breach log, and they already had a data breach log. We also asked for a reference number of the HR company's data breach, so we could refer back to it later if further investigation was required. The interesting thing the ICO said, we asked them, you know, what do you envisage the repercussions to be on this? They said the fact you're handling it, obviously the organisation, but with us handling it like this could mean the difference between a monetary fine. So that really shows that cooperation is key when it comes to this, and documenting. If you're showing that you're taking it seriously, you're at the other end of negligence. And the ICO guys, the enforcers, are ex-police inspectors. I worked for the police for 6 years. I know what these guys think. And saying that, oh, why don't you go after the real criminals?
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work. No. So the same thing is true here, and it's been nice for us actually, because we've managed now to gain a good relationship with the ICO. So you know, they know what we do when we call up. You know, don't always speak to the same person every time. One thing I forgot to tell you, Suzanne, is that for our own records, we needed to take the ICO case number, just to keep an eye. A bit like, you know, when you lose your phone, you've got to get a car reference number. They said, look, actually, we're so inundated with data breaches, and other complaints, we'll have to get back to you in 4 days. They're 4 days behind.
Wow.
So, you know, that just gives you an idea of the environment that we're living in now. And, you know, I think they're going to be a big government department going forward.
So with the so you're right, there was two data breaches there, one from the HR people and one from your client.
Yeah.
So the data, if you think about them as individual data breaches, did you consider with your client whether they had to, as part of that data breach, whether they had to notify the individuals concerned?
Yeah, we discussed that with the ICO, and it was decided that the HR company, because they're their data subjects, then they would be in charge of doing that, and they would be, you know, they would be measured.
And you then communicated that to the HR company.
Yes.
Right, yeah. But that was the ICO's view on that.
Yeah.
They said that. Right.
Yeah. So you know, we checked that, because that's one of the things when you're assessing when you have a data breach. First of all, you know, is it a data breach in the first place? But also, what impact is it going to have? Because as we both know, if it's a serious data breach, it needs to be reported within 72 hours. Not investigated, but reported. And then the investigation can continue through that and after that. But also when data subjects need to be informed of that and a company assessing it. And the ICO can assist with that. But that's sort of like the third category. You know, is it just something we have in-house? Is it something we report to the ICO? Is it something we report to the ICO and the data subjects?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Amazing, isn't it, how that can happen? And then, so I think a key point there is that, so the HR, the payroll company, was it payroll or was it wider HR?
It's let's call it HR consultancy. I've had to change some of the details. So,
but they were a processor, were they, or a joint controller?
Controller in this occasion.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So just thinking about in terms of liability, if there was a civil claim in that case, I'm just wondering about, because if the HR company was a processor, then and you'd asked them to send certain records and they'd not done that and hadn't followed your instructions, then there would be clearly liability there for the processor and under the not just under GDPR from the regulator, but through contractually through the processor agreement. So was there a joint controller agreement in place in this instance?
I don't think, because I've had to change I've had to change some of the details of this. I have to think on that. I think that I
suspect that probably wasn't. I suspect that wasn't, because GDPR is saying people probably haven't.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. And I think, the point that you raised when we were talking earlier, Adrian, about things like, particularly the Ticketmaster data breach recently. Two things fell out of that for me. One is that was the data breach was suffered through one of their processes that they were using. So number one, it's really key to do really robust due diligence on your processes to make sure that they've got the latest, security measures in place to make sure they're not going to get hacked or whatever else. Two-form verification,
verification.
Yeah, exactly, and all that kind of stuff, because that's where where I think they failed in that instance. And then also obviously having your processor agreements in place so that you can, because you will be investigated at that point. So it's a legal obligation to have that in place, but also for liability wise as well to have that there. And the other thing that fell out of the Ticketmaster data breach for me was that, as Adrian alluded to before, it's this new breed of data protection experts, stroke solicitors, who will be putting sponsored ads on Facebook saying, were you impacted as a part of the Ticketmaster data breach? If so, we're bringing a class action. Obviously I think that depends on the size of the company. If you're a really small business, there's no chance of I say there's no chance, maybe there is. I mean, this is the thing, we're in an uncharted territory. We really don't know, but I think that's the fact that there is this GDPR opens up the prospect of civil actions and therefore class actions. I think is it's got to be concerning for a lot of businesses. Okay, other data breach. Is there any other data breaches that you have been working on?
There's another one I wanted to mention, which is more cyber related. And that was whereby, and this actually happened a couple of times after our phone call. I just checked with the guys back in the office. And what's been happening is that those have been, that's called hackers, are hacking into websites and rediverting information on a contact form to rather go, which behind that contact form will go to say an email address or a database. They're rediversing that somewhere else. So we got a call that said, we're usually getting 12, 15 inquiries a day. The last week, we've had nothing. It's been, so working with them, investigating.
Did they suspect there was a data breach? Is that why they got in touch with you? Because I'd just assume that my plugin's broken, would be my first reaction.
Yeah, they thought something was fishy. And I think they wanted to they were already in this compliance framework with us. So we're increasing their awareness on the security stuff because we do a security check as our part of our gap analysis. And it's all, why not? We pay for the service. Let's call the guys, and that happened to be the case. Now the thing is, the information that was taken there was email address, name, and then whatever was in the comment. But I've noticed, like, say for instance in dentistry, the information on a contact form can include like healthcare, And this is just like you're just signing up, wanting to see if I can get a checkup. So if that information was, you know, if you said, oh, I've got high blood pressure, or I've got, you know, maybe HIV or something like that, you know, that information getting diverted is huge. And looking at the ICO's reports of 17 to 18, you know, for instance, healthcare is like nearly 40% of data breaches are reported with that. So you've got to think, you know, what information is coming through on my web page, and how secure is that? Am I checking that correctly? That security, because article, I can't remember what it's now. Security, Article 32, security of processing. You know, what am I doing there? So that's something that's happened a couple of times, and like you said,
what happened there then, Adrian? Did they notify, or did they think there was just not, you know, did they notify the ICO? Was it something that
on this particular case, I don't know exactly. I think it was seen as just an internal breach report, but I'll have to double check with that. I wasn't involved in that particular one, but definitely I think if it was more higher level type of information that's being taken, then, you know, we're looking at an ICO report. The ICOs have actually released, I don't know if you caught their webinar this week on data breaches and what needs to report and what doesn't need to report.
I advertised it in my newsletter and didn't see it myself because I was on holiday and the Wi-Fi was just...
Yeah, they've recorded it, so I'll share the link with you.
Oh, would you?
Yeah. So I need to catch up with that actually myself, because I couldn't get into it for some reason. So that's going to give some further clarification. But the main thing is, you know, I know you've got it in your pack, the data breach log. Use it, because even if you get an audit, you know, you at least show it's on your register. If it seems quite low level, then, you know, you can probably justify it. If it's got a grey area, I would say report it.
So just to read out the the text of Article 33, which is where you have to notify the breach to the ICO or whichever is your relevant supervisory authority. It is in the case of a personal data breach, the controller shall, without undue delay and where feasible, not later than 72 hours after having become aware of it. Now, question, what does where feasible mean? But, you know, let's just try and stick to the 72 hours if we can.
Yeah.
Notify the personal breach to the supervisory authority unless the breach is unlikely to result in a risk to the rights and freedoms of natural persons, i.e. people. So where the notification is not made within 72 hours, it shall be accompanied by reasons for the delay. So again, you can have some fairly solid reasons for any kind of delay there. And people do get fined for not notifying within the time frame. In fact, there was one. Did I do that in my last newsletter? I think it was. There was one. Yes, I think it was it that. Anyway, somewhere, I think it was a webinar that I did recently. I've done too much content recently. A webinar that I did recently. There was one business that sent one wrong email to one wrong person.
SSE.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And they were fined £1,000. And for me, it's not the fine that, you know, I can live with £1,000. It's not the end of the world. My business isn't going to go under because of a fine of £1,000. But now I'm on that record, you know, of not having notified the ICO and being used as a case study, and I don't like that. I think that's terrible for my business. Well, clearly for me, it'd be absolutely awful. But you know, for anyone's business, it's not where you want to be, is it really? So, so you've got to be really on top of. And again, I think that's something that people panic about. It's like, well, is it going to result in a risk to the rights and freedoms of natural persons? Because there's not a exhaustive list of 100 scenarios where it's going to be likely to result in a risk to the rights and freedoms of people. And that's, I think, where it's so handy to have like your helpline, Adrian, where you know, you're dealing with these day in, day out. People can phone you up and you've got that relationship with the ICO, and people can phone up and say, well, you know, should I be reporting this or not? And I think just having that trusted advisor there to bounce that off is
and it's insured advice. I come from an insurance background, and I think that is important. We don't just, that's our, you know, we just rely on that. It's a safety net that any consultancy professional company should have. The reason I say that is because some people might do this, but they're quite often, if they're in Facebook groups, let's say business Facebook groups, and they say, I've had a data breach and what do I do about it? well, the thing, don't put that because it makes you look a little bit silly. Second of all, who knows what's going to come back? And if you're relying on that, you know, you can't just say, oh, Johnny in Facebook group A said it, Your Honour. So
exactly. I think it's going to hold a lot more sway with the ICO if they're consulting with you rather than taking, you know, putting a message in a Facebook group. I absolutely agree on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else do we need to say about data breaches? So firstly, firstly, don't panic when you find out about it. Well, actually, even before that is the thing to appreciate is that it could be months before you actually find out that a data breach has actually happened. Okay, that's the first thing, particularly where it's more on the IT side rather than an employee incident. You know, if you've been hacked or, you know, something's happened there, then often it is. We see it with the cases about the big companies. It's months and months until they find out that they've been hacked. You know, so that's the first thing. And then obviously you're in trouble with the time periods because, well, actually it's having become aware of it is when the time period kicks in. But if you've got a system and if you've not got that staff training in place, and maybe you've got an IT person who suspects it, and then he tests things and speaks to things, and by the time it's come to anyone who can do anything about its attention, it's 2 months down the line. That's when you've got problems, because the becoming aware of it is the first person within the organization who becomes aware of it. So that's why you need to have that really the great training, the systems in place to escalate it quickly, and for employees to know that they're, you know, not going to get the sack if they report it. Basically, it's a training issue rather than a sacking issue. So that's the first thing to know. It might be, you know, an unobvious breach, shall we say. Second thing is, you know, don't panic. I would absolutely phone up Adrian, and I think that would be, for me, the invaluable next step would be to phone someone like you up. I mean, I wouldn't because I know about it, but if I was a small business owner that didn't, you know, that wasn't an expert in this area, that would be, and you don't have in-house lawyers and things like that, then I'd absolutely be on the phone to Adrian. And from there, really, you're guiding them through the process, aren't you? So as long as they're aware of, you know, the obligation to act quickly once you've discovered the breach and hop on the phone to you rather than, you know, run around like a headless chicken or do nothing for a few weeks. That's kind of the takeaway from this call, isn't it, really, I suppose? Because
that's part of the value.
Because I think that is a key decision whether to report it or not. It's such a key decision that if I wasn't an expert in this area, I wouldn't want to take that decision by myself. I think that's the key point.
And we help, you know, we help people asking questions to interrogate that particular issue. We can't make the decision for them, but we can say, look, let's see it from this point, these different perspectives. We've dealt with similar things before. We may bring in one of the other consultants from the Metros Group. It's not always me that picks up that phone, but to help get that, so it seems it's clear, it's reasonable, and you could back up your decision later on.
And we don't know at the moment about, so we heard earlier about the data breach through the subject access request, and your client was told that the way that they had documented it and responded meant that it would be the difference between a fine or not. And I suppose we don't yet know the amount of the fine that the HR company is likely to get. Did the ICO allude to what the fine might be?
They didn't. I mean, it was. I wouldn't say it was off the record, but it was, you know, from what they'd looked at, the way that we were able to communicate something positive back to our clients. How they're going to deal with the other party, they couldn't mention about that with the specifics. But I think one of the things that I was discussing with the guys in the office this morning is the fact that something like this opens up the ICO whether they want to start auditing other areas. So I think if you're an organization, you're watching this video, you've bought Suzanne's pack, but haven't started it yet, then I would, you know, just think that the gateway into someone checking you out could be on the back of a data subject access request not being handled correctly, or a data breach not being handled correctly, and to look into that. Document. Even if it seems like it's overkill, do it. is my advice on the back of that. How the other company did it, I don't know. They're a national firm, and they gave all sort of all the let's call it lip service, all the spiel that they were GDPR compliant. Yet this still happened. Are you there? Hello? 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 Hello?